My name is Norm Kirby. I live in Lions Bay, British Columbia. I served in World War II in England, France, Normandy, Belgium, Holland, and on to Germany at the end of the war. I started out as a private, the lowest man in the rank and the smallest guy, and they give me the biggest gun to carry. As a private, and I got to be a corporal and then a platoon sergeant, and actually at the end of the war I was an acting platoon commander. And when the war ended I was still 19 years old, and when I came home to Canada I couldn't vote, and I couldn't go in to have a beer with my dad because I wasn't old enough. But there was nothing odd about that. That's just the way it was. You had to be 21, and there was thousands of servicemen coming back, and nobody paid much attention to us then. We went through our life, tried to, as well as we could. I actually forgot all about the war until the 50th anniversary come up. Well, I was on the tugboats, as I say, and I went to work for Kate's and then several others and a couple of logging camps, and the war was on then, and I thought, gee, I'd like to be in on that. I don't know why. I'm not a brave person, but I tried to join the Navy because I was working on the tugs. I thought they'd make me a captain or something. But anyway, they wouldn't take me because I didn't have a high school graduation, or I'd never been to high school. So then I tried the Air Force, and they just laughed at me. So I went to the Army, and they grabbed me and said, hey, you're not old enough yet, but we'll work it out. So they give me a paper and they said, you got to get your mom or dad to sign this before we can put you in here because you're not of age yet. And I went to my mother, and she looked at it and she says, I'm not signing that, they'll kill you. And oh, okay, so I went to my dad and he said, where do I sign? So I was able to get in. I was still a few months short of 18 and a half, so they put me in anyway under, I don't know what they called it, but I got in and took some training here in Vancouver at Little Mountain and out in around the Shaughnessy there, marching around, and the parade square was at 41st and Oak. It was that's where the barracks were, the number 11 depot for the Army. It's quite a big place. And anyway, I used to take the ferry from North Van, take the old Oak Street streetcar out to 41st and get there in time for parade. A couple of times I fell asleep on the streetcar and ended up in Marpole and had to come back again. But anyway, there, and then I was shipped to Wetaskiwin, Alberta, basic training, and I think it was probably about a month or 5 weeks or something like that. They cut it short. Then I went to Curry Barracks in Calgary, and took advanced training and went out to the Sarcee range to take commando training. They called it commando training. It was just basically advanced infantry training. So I was pretty well trained, and on the target range I had a hard time. I had one of the old Lee Enfield rifles that we used, were the standard weapon for the infantry, the .303 bolt action rifle, the same one as my grandfather used in World War I. And one of them blew back on me, and from then on, every time I went to shoot, I'd flinch, and I just couldn't hit the target. But the training officer said, "Hey, you're going to be okay." He says, "We'll fix it," and he did a couple of things, and I got passed anyway. But he did take me aside and said, "You should specialize in the Bren gun," and he showed me that, and I tried that out, and I loved it. I just thought it was perfect. One of the reasons you had to be prone. You can't. It's not one of these that you see in the movies where you can walk around and shoot from the hip. You got a couple of guys with you to carry the ammunition, and you can shoot as much as you want, and that. And the other thing, when you on single shot, there was no kick or anything. It just click back and forth, and it had a flame arrestor on the front, so there was no big flash, and the enemy would have to be looking right at you in order to see where you were. Anyway, I had training with that, so I was shipped over to England. Went over on the ship, the New Amsterdam, to Greenock, Scotland. I think there was 12,000 troops on board that ship. The food was good, but you only ate twice a day. Your meals were 12 hours apart. And everything you did, you had to line up. At night, we had to go down into the bilges of the ship, and the big watertight doors would close, and a room about this size, I think there would be maybe 60 guys in it. Half of them would have hammocks strung close together, and the other half would get to lay on the floor, and next night they'd change over. It was very spooky and that, but anyway, we went across the ocean by ourselves, not in convoy, at full speed, I guess, and I think we spotted one German observation plane, but other than that, we had no problem. From Greenock, we took a train down to Midlands, a little more training and whatnot, and then I was transferred down to the south of England. I believe it was either Shoreham or Boscombe, and I was put into the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment. And because I was from the North Shore, I used to think they got mixed up, but that wasn't the case. It was because they had taken so many troops. One of the regiments that were slated for the invasion in a key area were on a training scheme. This is what I heard. I don't know how true it is, but they're on an amphibious training scheme, and they run into some German motor torpedo boats who wiped out almost 2 companies of these fellows. So it was getting close to D-Day, and they needed new troops, so they couldn't take brand new. They had to take training, so they took a bunch of the North Shores and a bunch of other ones, and that's why the reinforcements ended up there. I don't think it had anything to do with the mix-up that way. But I ended up in the North Shore Regiment, and basically there were New Brunswick was bilingual even in those days, and especially the part around Bathurst and the North Shore of New Brunswick were Acadians. Well, I thought I was in the Foreign Legion, and they didn't care for me, and I wasn't that excited about them. But as time went on, and especially after D-Day, I got to know them, and I think some of them were the best friends I ever had in my life, is those guys in that outfit. And I just feel bad that so many of them are gone. I didn't think much of it. I'd been on ships before. In fact, when I was younger, I went to Hawaii on a tugboat and back during the war. We towed a big oil barge over to Honolulu. And they wouldn't let me go ashore. I was just too young. Honolulu in those days was a pretty rough port. So I never did get ashore there, but I'd been on boats before, so I knew my way around. So I wasn't too excited about it or concerned. The landing craft is a different matter. We had all our gear, and I had a Bren gun and a bunch of ammunition and a couple of guys with me carrying more ammo. We didn't have life preservers as such, but we had flak jackets, no Kelvar in those days. You had a canvas sack on the front and one on the back with a steel plate in it. And I think the two of them weighed close to 40 pounds, so I knew that if anything happened, I wasn't going to be able to even wade ashore with that. So I dumped it. I took my ammunition pouches and stuff off, and when the landing craft hit a mine and went down, I was able to swim. There was some, not life preservers, but like water wings, like these kids have, they put on their hands and that. There was some of those on the ship, on the landing craft. I had a couple of those. And I got to shore okay, and I didn't do anything that day. I got to shore, no weapons, no nothing. I had a knife, fork, and spoon. And later on, people said, well, you must have heard about the French cooking and be prepared, but that wasn't the reason. I wandered around on the beach. I did not fire a shot. I didn't even have a weapon. And I asked some people, and they said, I think the North Shores are over there, and I kept on going. And I come across some people, and I heard this voice come out, it was a sergeant. And he said, where the hell did you leave the Bren gun? And I pointed to the ocean out there, and I think if he said, well, you better go and get it, I would have. But anyway, he took me in and got me re-kitted with another gun, and with a new Bren gun section. A Bren gun section is the machine gunner, a lance corporal in charge of it, who also carries the ammunition, and an ammunition carrier. The lance corporal is usually the guy that points out the targets and whatnot. And I think that probably had a lot to do with saving my life. Because when we went into an attack, the officer or the sergeant would set me aside and get me a position, a prone position, and give me where I should be shooting and when. And I watched the guys go into the attack. The corporal, I believe, is the backbone of the army, the infantry. I think it was Napoleon that said, every corporal has a field marshal's baton in his knapsack. And I think that has a lot to do. I didn't want to be a corporal because I thought, gee, there's that guy. He's out in front leading his 10-man squad, and he's got nothing between him and the enemy but that shitty little Sten gun that probably shot more of our own guys than it did the enemy. And I thought, what a terrible job. You know, I was quite happy with the Bren gun. I could be to one side or this side, and somebody would point out the targets that they wanted me to get, and I got pretty good with the Bren gun. And on single shots, I could do sniping with it. I had trained in commando training with the PIAT, the Projectile Infantry Anti-Tank, a very awkward, ugly weapon, but very effective. But there were so few projectiles for it. They had a special beehive charge in there that made a pinhole in the armor when it went in and come out with a huge spray of white-hot shrapnel. Would rattle around in the tank and set off the ammo and the fuel and the people. And that. So it was, but there were so few projectiles there that I was one of the few people that actually fired it a few times. In Normandy, close to the Falaise Gap there, we were going a lot of hedgerows and that in there, and even the tanks could not penetrate them at times. Some of them were so thick. But anyway, word came down around the road that there was a Tiger tank heading down towards us, and the officer talked to the sergeant. The sergeant come up to me and said, "Kirby, you're the guy. You're the one that's had experience with this. I want you to go up that road, in the ditch alongside of the road. Go up there, and when the tank gets 75, 50 feet from you, shoot it." He says, "I'll be there and I'll give you the signal. Just look at me behind you." So I was scared. I don't think I'd ever been so frightened in my life. But anyway, I went up there and I got settled, and I could hear the tank, and then I could see him coming, and he was rattling along at a pretty good rate. And I don't think he saw us. And I looked back at the sergeant, and he shook his head no, but the tank hit a little bump in the road and tilted up a bit, and I could see the underbelly of the tank, and I let drive, and I got him. It was a good shot, and it stopped the tank and everything around it. The American Air Force, the bombers, 4-engine bombers, were flying over us, and we had all our yellow cloths out, spread out on the tops of our trucks, and we were in trucks at that time, and we bailed out of them and went into the open field, and I found a little opening and a little ditch and fell into it. But we saw the bomb bay doors open, and all of a sudden we saw the bombs letting loose. And what happens in the American Air Force, and I could be wrong, so, but once they drop their bombs, that's mission complete, and that counts as a mission. And they have to do 50 missions, that's one less they have to do. And it seems that as long as those bombs are away, that's it. They're credited with the mission. But anyway, they landed right on top of our unit and a couple of others that were with us, a Polish group that were attached to us. And we had over 300 casualties from that one bombing strike. I noticed that they didn't even get to the enemy lines when they dropped their bombs and turned around and headed back. It was very noticeable. I was in A Company. I started in A Company, 2 platoon. And actually, at the end of the war, I was in A Company, 2 platoon. But I was the acting platoon commander by that time. In La Treasury, I was a Bren gunner. And we were ordered to attack these huge bunkers. Now, they were guns that were firing right across the channel into England. A guy could almost crawl down the barrel. They were that big. We watched them for a day shooting, and you could actually see the projectile, especially at night, you could see the projectile actually going through the air on its way to England. They were all, they couldn't turn that gun on us, but they had, around the perimeter, they had anti-aircraft guns and equivalent to our Bofors and that, and machine guns. Anyway, we were going into the A Company, was ordered to attack it, and we were losing people all the way along, but we've done that before. I didn't see anything unusual about it. It's not nice to see, but somehow Lance Corporal George Wilson from North Vancouver was the Lance Corporal in charge of the Bren Gun section, and there was another fellow, I think he was from the prairies, I don't remember his name, he was killed. We ended up right smack in front of this big bunker, right where the entranceway. They had a dogleg tunnel going into it. I'm trying to remember, but I don't think we're any more than a little over 100 yards maybe from there. And we were in a huge shell hole that you could put this downstairs of this house in a bomb crater from one of the big bombs, big 1,000-pound bombs. It was quite deep. There was some water down at the base, but around the rim, it was we were on the rim of this, and I don't think we had been noticed until then. The enemy were all locked up in their bunker there, but I guess somehow they spotted us. So there was the three of us. So we had a Sten gun, a .303 rifle, and a Bren gun. I set up the Bren gun. Gabby told me where to put it up, and he said we're going to set it up here, and then we're going to move it down here and then back again so that they won't know where we are or how many are here. He was pretty good. He was a good guy. So we were having a field day. They would come out of the dogleg and they'd try to run to the machine gun emplacement or the anti-aircraft gun emplacement, and they had 50, 100 feet to open ground to go over, and we were picking them off pretty good. I think the next day, my company commander said that you guys got 14, which is not too bad. Anyway, we got a little sloppy or something, I don't know, and they got to one of the guns, the anti-aircraft guns, and turned it on us, and they just shot the top of the parapet we were hiding behind all over, and we kept moving around in there, and Gabby was quite a character. He's kind of a red-headed guy, but he could talk like Bugs Bunny or Donald Duck and that. So he'd be down at one end and he'd be doing Donald Duck, and then he'd run over here and he'd be doing Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd. And I actually, by that time the Germans were trying to creep up on us. I think some of these guys had seen the cartoons or something maybe when they were kids, and I don't think they wanted to shoot Donald Duck. But anyway, that's my opinion. But anyway, it got pretty serious. By nightfall, they were coming up with grenades, and by this time they shot the Bren gun to pieces, and our loader disappeared. I think he got down in there, and maybe he was under the water. I don't know. I never saw him again. Maybe he's still running. I don't know, but we assume that he's dead. Gabby and I decided to get the hell out of there. So we went around the rim to the other side, and we had no weapon left, no ammunition left, and we thought we'd go back to headquarters. Headquarters had orders to retreat before we got there. I don't know who gave the order, but we never got the order, and that's why we were right out ahead of everybody else. And everybody else went back and dug in, and headquarters was in an old bombed out basement. This is an odd part. By the time I got Gabby back, he could hardly walk. He was just gone to pieces. I mean, here's a good NCO, and he just went to pieces. He was crying. He couldn't walk. We walked into our headquarters nobody stopped us. There was no sentry out there or anything. And Major Fred Moore, that's M-O-A-R, was our company commander. he was a captain then, but he was a acting company commander. And he ordered us to go out and stand sentry duty. And Gabby refused to go. And I told him what had happened, and he softened up a bit, but he arrested Gabby right on the spot. He had him arrested. And I should have stuck up, I guess, for him. One of the reasons I didn't is that Gabby said, "I don't care what they do to me, Norm." He says, "I'm not going out there." So I would have stuck my neck out for nothing. He didn't want to go. So anyway, I went out and stood sentry duty and that for them. And I don't know, to this day, it's a mystery to me what happened to Captain Moore, why he did this. I guess we never retreated before, and this was something that, this is my opinion, that really bothered him. He never acted like that before that, or after. But I mean, we were out there for 3 or 4 hours, and we shot almost every mag we had. We emptied. The Germans were shooting at us, and there was nobody else around. So they must have heard us. I mean, this is not, they must have heard something. And even, the company has 120 men, and I guess there was at least 100 left. But nobody caught and wondered where we were. And that's why I got it into my head, is that the homeboys would be noticed if they were missing, and because we three were foreigners almost, nobody bothered with it. Now, that is my opinion, and I don't know how sound it is, but I believe it to this day. So anyway, the next day, Corporal Hunt, who later became our CSM, our sergeant, company sergeant major, picked me to accompany him. He says there's enough space for the two of us to do this, and he said, I'm going to take Norm Kirby with me, and he's going to take the Bren gun, and he's going to take the Piat, and I know what we're going to do. He set me up with the Bren gun and the Piat, and he said, I'm going to go into that tunnel, the entry tunnel. It's had a dog leg in it. He said, I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to stoop over, and I want you to shoot 6 inches over my head. Not 16 inches, and not 3 inches, but 6 inches over my head with the Bren, and just keep it going steady till I get to the mouth of that tunnel. And he got to the mouth okay. He signaled me to put the Bren gun away and pick up the Piat. And he pointed to the face of the tunnel. He was standing to one side, and he stood to side, and he pointed where he wanted me to aim, and I aimed the Piat, and I shot it. One shot. It went in the tunnel. It must have ricocheted off the dog leg and hit the armored door and blew the armored door to pieces. Hunt went wading in there with his Sten gun and come out with, I don't know, I think well over 100 prisoners. I think in the North Shore Regiment book, the writer Bird said 35, but there's pictures there of the whole 2 fortresses, and there's must have been almost 500 men there. So anyway, I was promoted to corporal then. Actually Lance Corporal, but I was, in all intents, a corporal. So that's the job I did not want. And I said, why can't I stay on the Bren gun? He says, no, you're a corporal now. You got to. So anyway, that's how I became a corporal. That's a picture taken in Capellen in the February of '45. This is my squad. This is a dirty old muddy rifle. We were A Company again. We were in reserve. Dog Company and C Company were doing the attack on Capellan. They were pinned down. This was a panzer group in there. They couldn't do much. We were called on all of a sudden. Captain Nutter called us that we were going to go in. But here we are. We've just butchered a steer, a wounded steer, and this guy's got the leg of it over here. We've got to get a fire going, and we're going to have steaks. These are all my guys, and we got a girly book here. That's what we're holding up, a girly book, me and him. And 2 hours later, I'm the only one left standing. A group of Sherman tanks came in and parked there, and we were ordered to climb on board the tanks. And the whole platoon of us got on there, and I think another platoon too got on. And there was no order or anything. We just climbed aboard the nearest Sherman. I got on the first one, and another fellow, Harold Henshaw, who was wounded then, but he even came out to Vancouver and visited me here. He was on it too. I didn't recognize him until one of the reunions. He was in another platoon, I think. He wasn't in my squad. But anyway, he's the one that actually described the battle. All 15 of the Sherman tanks were knocked out. The tank I was on was knocked out, and everybody on it was blown off. I lost my weapon. I didn't have a weapon. And I staggered around there for a few minutes and got my bearings. We were heading for the garrison, and the head guy in there. That was our objective. I found a young guy from another platoon wandering around. I got him, and we picked up a German Schmeiser and a couple of mags. Did a little bit of shooting on the way, but we got into the garrison itself, and I think the citation that Hunt wrote up for me said that I captured the garrison commander and persuaded him to order a ceasefire of his troops, which he did. He didn't do it voluntarily, but I guess I was angry enough that he obeyed it. I said, look, I'll make a deal. We've got a lot of wounded out there, your guys and my guys. I said, if you get your troops, some of your men, and you take the bedsteads out of the garrison here and make stretchers out of them and go out and pick up our guys and your guys. You don't have to discriminate against them, and we'll treat you well. If you don't, it's going to be, I don't know what I said, but anyway, he did it. And I'll say this for the guy, he was a major. He kept his word. He ordered his men to take down the bunk beds and make stretchers out of them and go out and pick up the wounded. And Wilcox there, I said, when you come to my Lance Corporal there, I said, you better treat him right or else. And he spoke good English, and he said, we'll do our part. And he did, and I have to hand it to him. But it was, we won the battle, our colonel, Colonel Rowley, was killed by a sniper. We lost a lot of people. I lost my whole squad. There wasn't one guy that came to roll call the next day. And I don't know, that's one of the things that has bothered me for so many years. That as a corporal, and later on as a platoon sergeant, that I had to send these guys to different positions. And by the end of the war, we were getting very short of people. So instead of having 11-man section, we ended up with maybe 6. And we still had the same amount of coverage that brigade would order us to look after. So we were getting down to one man in a foxhole or a slit trench. And that's not very healthy. And because I had to do this, in one case I told the guys 4 guys to dig in below a wall, and a bomb hit the wall and killed all 4 of them. These are the things that bother me, and I guess it bothers a lot of other people. I don't know what it is. I'm a pretty chicken-hearted person as a rule. But going into an attack, something would happen to me. I don't know what it was, but I just felt, hey, I can do this, and I'm good at it. I'd never really been good at any job I had, just being a kid and that, and kicked around, but very seldom I ever got promoted or a pat on the back, or usually a kick in the ass is what you usually got from some of these captains. I thought I can do this, and and there's something, I don't know what it is, but I just felt that way. And when the attack was over, and things are pretty crappy, you know, there's bodies all over the place, and broken down buildings, and everything is in a mess. Then I hated it. I hated the army. I hated the war. I hated every part of it. But going into an attack, there was something about it that I could handle, and I think I did fairly well. This, I think, is in Groningen, in Holland. And these are some of my guys. Some of them look like kids and that, and they are. But these are Dutch kids. We just chased this is minutes after we chased the Germans out of the town, our section of the town. And all of a sudden, all of these little kids come out, and they had all these colored hats and ribbons and stuff like that. They must have hidden that for 5 years. They'd been occupied by the Germans. And to me, after all of the horrors that I'd been through, to come in there and see this, to me, that's my favorite picture. Yeah, it's my favorite picture. In those days, the Germans had everything zeroed in. They knew almost every tree and ditch in the place. They had it all measured out, and they could drop a mortar bomb right down in your back pocket. So you didn't want to be in a building. So you slept out, and most of the time it was the summertime anyway. And we dig what we called a slit trench. The Americans, I think, call them foxholes. About 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and as deep as you could get. The deeper, the safer. Sometimes this was fairly shallow, but other times you're about 4 feet deep, so you could stand up and look around and that. One time in just out of the Hochwald forest, I was a sergeant, and as I was saying, sometimes there's only one man in a foxhole. I was going around to check on the guys, and I jumped into this one one hole with a guy, and he was curled up in there, and I think he was asleep. And for some reason, I don't know what happened, I bent over, and I believe it must have been at least a 3-inch mortar, landed right on the side of the slit trench, and it just caved in on us. They dug me out, and I was unconscious for the whole day. The guy on the bottom, it wasn't when they got him out, there wasn't a mark on him, but he must have smothered to death, been unconscious and smothered to death. So that's one of the reasons that, that was a close call. The other part of it is, and why we used to try and get a door or something and cover it over, is some of these bombs would hit the trees, and by the time an attack is over, the trees are just skeletons, but they set off the bomb up above, and you get the downdraft, the airburst, which are bad. But I don't think in that first 6 months that I slept under a roof. I slept outside all the time. Your rations, each company had a 60 hundredweight vehicle and a couple of 1500 weights and a Jeep. But we had a cook and a portable kitchen. They'd bring out and cook a hot meal when they could. Other times you got the compo ration. The Americans had a K ration, we had compo. Well, it was a wooden box, or later on a cardboard, waterproof cardboard box. And it was some horrible stuff in it, but there was, hey, if you got a box with pork and beans, that was super, that was good. You know, one of the favorites was chipped beef on toast, which we called shit on a shingle. But in this box, you got 7, which was English cigarettes, Naffy cigarettes, 7 sheets of toilet paper. You know, it's just meant for a squad, and canned stuff and that. Well, it wasn't bad. You could eat it. Mostly corned beef, and cans of corned beef. Not for human. We say not for human consumption, but not for civilian consumption. But it was made in Argentina, which wasn't even on our side during the war. In the town of Sutphen, I was the platoon sergeant. Sergeant Finley, Ernest Finley, was my platoon commander, a lieutenant. We were crossing the canal. We were wading across. Some of the troops further up had rubber boats, but we waded across. Finley and I were in the middle of the canal, and a sniper shot him. I dragged him to the shore. He was dead, of course. And I took his map case, his pistol. His pistol is that one right there. Binoculars, and got the coordinates of our objective in Sutphen. This is a town right on the German border, close to the Rhine. It's not the Rhine, but it's one of the rivers there. I got him ashore, got the thing, found out my objective, and took charge of the platoon. And there was a piece in the Maple Leaf, the newspaper, about me taking command of the platoon. We fought some. It wasn't too bad a going to our objective in close to the middle of town. We didn't have radios. At company at company level, you had a radio, but platoon levels, we did not have radios. No, these walkie-talkies or something, but they had these big sets. But if you're laying down prone, they were no good. But when you stood up, they made the best target. So, you know, so we were using a runner, and I sent the runner back to Major Murray to say that I had got our objective. The runner came back and said, Murray has got a problem. He's been pinned down by some shooters up on the city hall there, and they can't use artillery or air power because these are Hitler Youth in there, and they've got a bunch of women and kids as hostages, and they're up on the roof and they're keeping us from proceeding any further. Can you do anything? I sent back, and all of a sudden the underground guys come up and said, we'll take your messages. And to take a runner going back through alleys and doorways and whatnot, and getting back and forth, took them 15, 20 minutes. These guys were getting our messages through just zap, zap. Anyway, I said I would send a message, I would try and look after it. I got a spotter, and I took a Bren gun and found a good spot. The spotter got a good spot for me. I went up there with the Bren and put it on single shot. And we were behind these guys. These guys were shooting out that way, and we're behind them. They didn't know we were there, I guess. And I took out two of them with a Bren gun and wounded the third. And he went down the stairs, and I think the women, I heard later that the women in there tore him apart. They were so pissed off at him. They were cheeky, very, very tough little guys, they young guys. Not all of them were small either, but they were really tough, and they didn't care if you shot them or not. They were brought up from when they were babies to be this way. They're not like the typical soldier who was a pretty honorable person. Anyway, I asked the guy, how do you get these messages back and forth so fast? He says, come, I'll show you. He took me into a house, and he went in the hallway, and there's a telephone. He picked the phone up. He says, see?
It was still connected?
Still connected, yeah. So much for the underground. But they were good. They were good. We were observers, spectators more than observers, on Market Garden, and close to Nijmegen, on the Arnhem-Nijmegen Bridge. That was our job, was guarding that bridge over the winter. That's the first jet plane I ever saw, trying to knock out that bridge. I didn't know what it was. And they were floating rafts down and everything else, trying to blow up the piers of the bridge. But anyway, we looked after that. Yeah, anyway, we watched the Brits come in. We had a good view. They come in, but this bunch come in, there was a company. They come in on gliders, big wooden gliders. They could carry about 20 men, and sometimes they could carry a Jeep. And I think they even had a 6-pounder come in on it. But what is happening is the Germans were expecting them, and they were plunking them off in midair, and these things is one of the worst sights I've ever seen, is one of these breaking up and 15 guys and that come tumbling down. And when they went to land, they had tripwires on all the posts. If you went through the fields in Holland in those days, you'd see all these fence posts sticking up, and with mines set on them and that. So anyway, I think there was supposed to be 60 of them left, and we got word that we were to go in and relieve them. They were at the front fighting, so we could get into them, and we didn't have to do any fighting or anything. But once we got in there to relieve them, one of the sergeants came to me and said, I want to show you something that might help you. He says, we're getting ready to leave. There's only about 20 of them or so that we're able to get out of there. It was a horrible thing. He says, come on, but you got to be quiet and that. So we got into this long old ditch. I guess it was centuries old. Bushes all over it, but there was little trails. I guess animals or something went up and down it. We went in, I don't know, a couple of 100 yards maybe a little less. And we come to an old stone building. It was all tumbled down, but there was some tin roof on it. So he got in here and then he said, be quiet, but he said, you're right in the middle of this Panzer group, right in here. He says, if you come in here and you can find out what they're doing. So he took me out and I went to my platoon commander with it, and who was Lieutenant Nutter, Harry Nutter, later to be captain and then transferred to brigade as liaison. Super guy. Took me for dinner in the 50th anniversary in Halifax when I was there. He said, I think we should man that. He says, we'll send a squad, a couple of guys, 3 guys out there and man it. We didn't take any weapons with us. I think we had a Sten gun that was there. We just left it there. But we didn't carry any weapons out there or anything because I didn't think it, what the heck, we wouldn't have stood a chance anyway. We were out there and we heard, at night, we could hear these tanks rumbling around, and our regimental colonel, he thought, we thought there were tanks moving around, getting ready to come at us. But we spotted the speakers around, and they'd turn on these speakers at night, and the tanks had already gone. So anyway, I'm looking through there the one day. I'm looking through the little hole, and I see this German officer, Panzer officer, with his high leather boots and that, strutting along. And the runner, Private Blakeney, great big brute of a man, always drunk, farted, earth shaking. That officer almost stopped in mid-step like this and started turning. And then he kind of shook his head, it couldn't be, and he kept on going. So anyway, we went back and reported that there was no tanks there, and I didn't take part in the actual attack, but they evidently got in there and took the position without losing a man. For some reason, we had a carrier platoon, but they brought in 2 of these Wasps. They were a Bren gun carrier with about a 200, 300 gallon tank on a trailer that we towed behind, full of something like napalm, with a nozzle out in the front. And for some reason, they give me command of these two Wasps. They said, Sergeant, you're going to... I had driven a Bren gun carrier before and whatnot, but I never had to go into an attack with one. And I took the lead one, and Corporal Lloyd, Elmer Lloyd, from Vancouver, Burnaby, I think, took the second. There was a machine gun nest up ahead, quite a good-sized one, and we were to go up and silence that. That was our job. I got partway off the starting point. I just got maybe 50, 100 feet away, and Elmer's carrier hit an underground mine. That's all I can think about. I don't know if it was manually set off or what, but it blew the machine and everybody ended up in the air. I looked back and I saw Elmer. Everybody carried a shovel in his back, hanging in some wires between the poles, hanging by some wires by his shovel. I couldn't do anything about it. I had a job to do. I had to keep on going. But I looked back and I saw my stretcher bearer, Gordon Fagan, from New Brunswick. He actually moved out to Vancouver, and he died out in South Vancouver in a care home last year. He was decorated by Montgomery with the citation, the same as I have, and I think he got it for that. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. So we went up, and by the time we got up there and silenced the machine gun nest, we had to cook them out, so that's the only way we could do it. Our carrier was shot up so bad, leaking and all of that, that we set fire to it because we were told not to let them get into enemy hands. I don't know why. They had better stuff than that. So we set it on fire and made our way back. And that's when... and I never asked about Lloyd or that. I just assumed he was dead, and never inquired any. You never did. You think, oh, maybe he's alive, maybe he is. Later in North Vancouver, my mom came back. She'd been over to Vancouver to shop at Woodward's, and she said, "I saw a guy with the North Shore flashes on in a wheelchair, and you must have known him." And I said, "What did you say?" She said, "I wouldn't talk to him. No, he was crippled. I don't want to talk to him at all." I said, "Why?" It must have been Elmer Lloyd. And then Fagan, later on at one of the reunions, I asked him, and he said, Elmer lived. Yeah, so he saved him. At the end of the war, no. I was in Germany, in a place called Easthusander, I believe is the name. Huge prison camp. I mean, when I say a camp, you think of buildings and towers. This was just barbed wire strung out miles around. And the Germans, we took the food in and dumped it, and they cooked it and did whatever they wanted to do with it. But my job was to take my squad and patrol for SS people that had deserted or gone underground or whatever, and dig them out and turn them over to the military police. And that's what I was out on the field with my guys, and a jeep come up with some meatheads in, military police, and said, "Are you Sergeant Kirby?" And I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, come with us." And he just took me and put me in the jeep, and away I went. It took me to Bruges, to an airport, put me in charge of a 30-man draft, flew me over to Aldershot on a Sterling bomber, and put me on a hospital ship to come back to the U.S. to take part in the invasion of Japan. I had volunteered months before to do that. I forgot about it, but I never had a chance to get my kit. My comrades didn't know, thought I'd deserted or had done something wrong, and they finally caught up with me and put me in jail or something. They didn't know. And that was it. I got back, and instead of going to Japan, they dropped the atomic bomb, so I was home free. I applied to get discharged. They had a long talk with me. I remember as a major saying that if I stayed in the service with my young age, and I was still 19 years old, that I would have a good chance of having a long career in the permanent force. But he says, you're going to have to go to high school. And that kiboshed it right there. I said, I am not going to go with a bunch of teeny boppers to high school. Because they'd be all way smarter than me. So I turned it down and took my discharge on it. So I got, in civilian life, I was one of the first people in our family. I went down to the district of North Vancouver and said, I want to buy a lot up in Capilina. I had an uncle that had a log cabin on Edgebastian Road, up in Edgewood Road. He had a 5-acre stump farm up there. And I said, I like Capilina. So they give me a list like this, tax sale lots. And I didn't have a car. So I took the streetcar out to the end of the line, right where the number 1 highway crosses Capilina River. That was the end of the streetcar line. And that was the first on my list. Going up the hill to Gladwin Drive. And I spotted this 3 or 4 lots there. My buddy was an Air Force veteran. He came along and he says, I'll take this one because it's low. And he said, I'm going to put a basement in it. I said, I'll take this one. That's nice and flat and level. And I don't want a basement. I just want a house. I went down to the district and I said, I want to buy this lot. I had it X'd on the paper. He said, okay. He says, you're a returned soldier, are you? And I says, yep. He says, well, you can have it for $100. That house is still there, by the way. I just happened to, about 6 months ago, stop and saw the owner taking his garbage out, and I went and talked to him. He couldn't believe that I had built that house.
How much do you think it's worth today?
I guess the lot would be worth a couple of $100,000. I would think, eh? Is it cheap, eh? I don't know. Yeah, that's. I just talked to him. I'm going to have lunch. This is in West Vancouver. Harry. Yeah. He just phoned me and said the Legion's having a lunch and would I come on Monday. So that's taken right at the cenotaph there in West Van. He had the Medal of Honor too. He was in the Navy, and he said that he took part in the clearing the mines or something like that. Yeah, and that's him again. I think there was a write-up in the North Shore News on this, on us. This I think is on the liberation of Holland. That's me. This is a friend of mine who lives on Cape Breton. His name is Stuart MacDonald. And this is a guy that landed on D-Day with me, is Hovland Chason. I think he's 86 years old now. I just talked to him a month ago. And this is taken in Holland. We got the red caps on. This was on that train deal we went on, the trek to Ottawa. Stuart says, we're going to wear red hats. I said, why are we wearing that? He says, because we're the first ones to cross the Rhine. Don't you know that? I was on Mike Duffy's program for half an hour with Mike Duffy. I thought he was a great guy. So that's why we're wearing the red hats. So there we are, the Three Musketeers, they called us on that. My brother asked my wife if I was going to go to the ceremony for the 50th anniversary of D-Day, and she said, "Why would you want to do that?" And my brother, who was also a Korean War veteran, airborne, well, my brother said, "Well, he was there." She said, "I didn't even know he was in the Army." So she said, "Well, I'm going to see that he gets there." She booked a trip through a local travel agent but I ended up in the Royal Horse Guards Hotel in London, and I was in the elevator coming down for supper, and I saw this gentleman, nice jacket and tie, and really neat looking little guy. That's him right there. He had a tie on, and I was trying to read it, and it said the North Shore Regiment. And I said, "The North Shore Regiment?" He says, "Yes." I says, "Me too." But he was with headquarters, so we didn't recognize each other. So he talked me into joining the Regimental Veterans Association, and I went back there quite a few times, met with the guys and that, and met a lot of them. Some of them came out to visit me here. I think there's 18 of us there. I think it was the last reunion I went to. There he is, and there I am. Stuart, Hov, Chason, and myself are the only three living. Yeah, that was awarded to me about 3 years ago by the French government. I took them about almost a year. They had to go through all my records, and it was actually the awards department of Canada that contacted me, and I had to give permission for them to look at my record. And this fellow from the War Department had to phone me every month because he says, "They can't award it if you're dead." So he said, "He's still alive." He says, "Stormin' Norman, are you still kicking?" What was his major? I forget his name. He used to joke a lot. He says, "You're a real killer, I hear." So anyway, this is the Legion of Honor. It's the highest award that a French soldier can get, and you don't necessarily have to be a soldier. Charles Lindbergh received it, I think, at Ace in the First World War. Rickenbacker, or whatever it was, Eddie, got it, I think, and with it comes a knighthood. And of course, before I can accept the knighthood, the Governor General of Canada had to give me permission to do it, and he's given me written permission and congratulated me on and get it. It's I don't think it's for any special action that I did. I think it was just I don't know what. But it's a very every general in France has to salute me. I don't know how well that'll go over, but.